What happens when an artist doesn't just represent the natural world, but makes it anew through a creative lens? 5 alumni artists work with animals, plants, and environments, crafting them into personal expression and commenting on the human impulse to alter the world around us. The exhibition, curated by Lesley Wright, director of the museum, includes paintings, printmaking, sculpture, and drawings by artist Fay Stanford, Pamela Crockett, Aaron Rothman, Regan Golden, and John Martin Bell.
Hi, so this is John Bell. I'm talking about my work in the exhibition Nature Made, and by extension, my practice in general. So these are pieces that come out of this project that I've been working on really for the last 10 years. It started with a fascination with the works of John James Audubon. I grew up looking at Audubon pictures and was always really fascinated by this effect that they have where there's an undeniable quality of realness, right, which mainly comes from their exactitude, kind of almost a hallucinatory exactitude, where every feather is articulated and kind of exact. But that coexists with these pictures that, they're undeniably dead in their own way, right? They're articulated in such a way so that the details of the creature are like obvious and named, right? You know exactly how the body works, the coloring across the body, where the beak is, etc. Frequently the same bird is depicted top and back, right? So that you get full range of coloring in one picture. And this goes to how Audubon would actually paint the works, where he would, or paint the birds, where he would, pin them to an actual board. And so they're incredibly, like I said, incredibly exact, but at the same time, very still and dead. And so there's this kind of uneasy concept of what's real here, where it's both real and could never, like, both undeniably very real, right, very exact and real, but also could never exist in nature as that. Likewise, another big influence of this work is Looney Tunes, right? Like Chuck Jones' works, so like Bugs Bunny, The Roadrunner, and I saw in those at a certain point kind of the opposite side of the same coin as the Audubon works, where you had movement and kind of jitteriness that was very real to me. Like I can watch those now and I can see my own dogs or my cat in some of that movement, some of that animation, right? But of course, if you stop and look at Bugs Bunny, right, he bears no resemblance to any living creature at all, right? Like there's the more you look at it, the stranger it becomes and the more abstract it becomes. So I began to view these kind of two things, and this is over a period of time, but I began to view them as kind of two sides of the same coin, where both created this weird kind of jittery space where what was real and what was abstract was unclear. It was kind of like a Mona Lisa smile thing, where it was, a smile and a frown at the same time. And I was really excited about the idea of that being a realm where different feelings can kind of coexist at the same time. So you can have just great joy and great pain. You can have stillness and frenetic energy. You can have these kind of seemingly opposite things happening at the same time. And so I began to think like, okay, what if I view, Looney Tunes and Audubon as kind of two sides of one spectrum and play around with stuff in between. So this started with paintings, right, where I would make paintings that where the goal was to kind of, my wife would call it like take an Audubon and kind of scramble it like you're scrambling an egg, where I would still focus on exactitude, but when it came to actually defining the limits of the creature, I would see what I could do to kind of diffuse that or kind of push it out. So, eyes were never in one place, or nose was never in one place. Or it would, if it was, it would be jarringly so, and you would be unclear whether or not we were looking at, a tongue, teeth, what exactly you were looking at. And so, the paintings in here are part of that. The white background serves that purpose really well too, where, I'm looking out my window right now at a perfectly white sky with some black tree branches kind of on top of it, right? But it could equally be a snowbank as ground. So there's kind of a ground sky ambiguity to them, where they just kind of live embedded within that space. So yeah, and then the sculptures started as really as kind of as a failure to I tried like the idea of what would happen if I made little armatures of the creatures I was trying to make, and like that I could pose around, right? And they looked completely ridiculous, and they didn't really live in the same world as my painting, so they were pretty useless in that front. But I really thought they were funny, and I made more because they spoke to something too. I think that's kind of when I started to articulate the idea around the Chuck Jones and Looney Tunes work, where they started to feel relevant in their own right. And I would use them as pressure releases for the paintings, where if I was making something in the paintings that I was really frustrated with, I would switch over to sculptures and kind of use them to mock the paintings, if that makes sense. And so over time, they became really interested in in material. So like they would use, I would use the wood of them or the plaster to, again, embed that kind of like verb, what happens if I try and make a creature that is a verb rather than a noun. The material itself would help facilitate that. That became another way of kind of, again, trying to get into this like realm of potential, where I felt like I could see, great sadness and also with great joy, right? I could see the kind of ridiculousness of both the paintings and the sculptures, and also, pain. All of these pieces, I think, have an element of suffering to all of them, but always combined with its opposite as well. I think that the thing that unifies the paintings and the sculptures too is that when it works, there's a moment where I'm working on a thing and all of a sudden it kind of no longer cares about what I think about it, right? It becomes kind of absorbed in its own loop of feelings and thoughts. And that's really cool, because that means that, if it works, it means that I can leave it and come back to it, and I kind of pick it up at a different part of its loop, or kind of like see it from a different angle of what it's thinking about, what it's doing, and at that point, it feels bigger than just a thing that I made. So right now, I'm beginning to work on paintings that I'm really excited about, in part because they come from a place that is a lot more like the place that I come from when I start a sculpture, than traditionally kind of how I would start a painting. And I think that's really exciting, and I'm curious to know what that will come to, if anything, and what the sculptures that I make will do. Maybe they'll just like switch jobs, but so I'm curious to see what happens in the future. Okay, that's it.